What's going on? Welcome to my recommended starter builds for the new Path of Exile 3.6 league. The 4 starters I recommended for 3.5 are still viable, so I won't be showcasing them here, but you have the path of building and YouTube links to all that in the description box below. I've killed Uber Elder with all the builds, so they are definitely true and tested. I've also included a couple of tips on how to build towards some of the newer skills at the very end of the video, so if you want to look that up, then fast forward to the end of the video. As you can see on the left side of the screen, I've listed all the builds that I've created path of building links for, and as you might know, Blade Vortex, Winter Orb, Explosive Traps and Brands have all been nerfed in one way or another. So I'm guessing a lot of people are sort of panicking, but there's really no need to. They will all still be incredibly strong and will all be very safe choices for your first 3.6 character. The developers have also implemented Leech for Energy Shield, so I'm expecting to see even more low life and chaos inoculation builds this league compared to the last. The Energy Leech should also be the one that profits the most from the change that puts a 10% leech cap of your maximum resource, and since it's easier to getting a lot more energy than it is to get life, it will also be easier to get more leech per hit when playing with Energy Shield. I still really like both of the brand skills as a starter, even if their damage has been slightly nerfed. But the case was that the damage was so over the top that even with the nerf they should both still be pretty overpowered, especially as a starting character. Neither one of them require much gear, and Stormbrand is still probably the fastest leveling skill in the game. The brand skill are also some of the safest, as you can place your brands and then just run around while they do their damage on their own. And then if you get a bit of trouble, just press brand recall and all of your brands will appear on top of you and kill everything around you. Both are good for both leveling and bossing, but I personally had more fun with Armageddon brand, even if Stormbrand was the faster leveling option. So play around with the both of them and then go for the one you enjoy the most. Then I also recommend starting with an Explosive Traps build, which has been a pretty underrated starting build these last couple of leagues. However, the damage has been slightly nerfed, but the area is increased, and the more linked gems you get, the damage effectiveness will show that it's probably an even better gem now than it was before. It's got amazing boss damage and completely destroys syndicate members. I ran the build both as a life and low life, but you'll probably start going off with the life based version and then possibly switch over in the late game if that's something you'd like. If you've never played a trapper before, then this is a nice and easy way to get into it, even if it can still take a while to get completely used to. Once you start getting some skill points and ascendancy points, you really start to get a feeling of what the build can do. For bosses, you want to place as many traps as possible on top of the boss and then let them all go off at the same time, with hopefully the majority of them going off twice. For protection and to be able to stand still and throw traps on most bosses, I opted to go for a decoy totem as well as a stone golem for a bit of extra protection. This really helps against the faster bosses that you might have a difficult time hitting with the traps otherwise. All the guardians and shapers should be easily accomplished with a tabla and some rares, while Uber Elder probably require at least some knowledge of the fight, but it's not overly difficult that either. I recommended an Infernal Blow Chieftain for 3.5 that will still be viable if you want to go through some trouble, but other than that there's really just one more melee build I enjoy currently, and that's Molten Strike ran as a raider with focus on flat elemental damage. These last couple of leagues have really left melee for dead as it currently is, so hopefully in 3.7 we'll have a ton more melee builds to play around with. Anyway, Molten Strike is still overpowered and definitely viable to kill everything in the game with a pretty insignificant gear setup. I ran this Uber Elder kit with a tabula and a Leucocide shield, but the shield is definitely not necessary and you can even do a wield instead if that's something you prefer. This is a very easy to play and easy to kill endgame bosses build that is a good option for people that hasn't killed the endgame yet or hasn't done so with a melee build at least. For gear I went for evasion, life, resistance and then mostly flat lightning damage. And as you can see, the damage was definitely decent for such little investment. My pantheon choices for these kinds of evasion builds tend to always be Lunaris and Gruthkul, and then get as many of the additional bonuses as you can with the divine vessels. For my Winter Orb character I ran it as an Inquisitor for the crit damage and to ignore enemy resistances, but Occultist should work very well as well. It's very similar setup to Blade Vortex, but you most definitely want to make sure you use great and multiple projectiles as soon as possible, and then let the multiple projectiles up until that point. The path of building will show loss in damage, but each of the projectiles will hit the target, so that's just something you ignore. The Winter Orb damage has also been slightly nerfed, but that's really because of all of the new skills that came out last league were completely overpowered and will still be great regardless. This is probably also why you want to look into one of the new skills as your second character, after you've farmed currency and bosses with one of these builds. Winter Orb is amazing for mapping, delving, bossing, syndicate members, yeah, basically everything in the game. It can just be slightly off at times with the auto targeting, but that's pretty much the only negative thing I have to say about the build. Both the build and the playstyle is very similar to Blade Vortex, as you have to stop and charge up stacks of the skill time to time. It's incredibly fun to play, and all the ice explosions are both satisfying to see, but also makes for a pretty safe playstyle. Lastly, I'm just quickly going to go over two builds regarding new skills that came out together with the 3.6 launch. The first is an energy shield and evasion based trickster that runs the new Divine Ire channeling skill. As a trickster, you now gain either a power or frenzy charge every second while channeling, so this should pretty damn OP with the new holy skill. Then either run flat elemental damage or pushing physical and then converting the damage. This should also work for elementalists and inquisitors, but I haven't played a trickster in some time, so this is probably something I'll play around with myself. It also looks really nice to combine the Divine Ire with something like the new infused channeling support gem and then stacked lightning damage on top of that. And the second character that should be a good starter with some of the new skills should be a cursed based occultist that runs Bane together with something like Soul Rend or the newly improved Essence Drain. Neither option should require that much gear to get going, so basically you combine your curses with Bane and then kill everything with that plus either Soul Rend or Essence Drain. This sort of damage over time build should also work very well together with the new Malevolence Aura Gem. Alright, that's it. Good luck guys. I hope 3.6 is a very enjoyable league for you all, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.